Sten, we're live.
Welcome back in the dugout. Thank you, Larry the Liberty Guy, and Mike Stenhouse, your host, with you. We're going to go with the Rhode Island hat today. It's not very often that Rhode Island makes national news, but the topic we're going to talk about today is making national news. I don't know where it will stop. Certainly making a lot of local news, and that's the issue of this South Kingstown, this corrupt, misguided South Kingstown School Committee that not only is just trying to pass this critical race theory curriculum into the schools in that town, but the process by which they're going about it is non-transparent, is thuggish, and they're race baited. And we're going to get into all that in just a second. So today, we're going to spend the first half hour, or first half of the show, I should say, talking about this, what should we be teaching our kids question and what happened last night in South Kingstown. I'll explain that more in a second. In the second half of the show, of course, we have Dr. Andrew Bostom come on. More things COVID, more information on these vaccines, a lot of questions being raised. So we'll talk to Dr. Bostom, of course. We'll get his comments on today's, on the governor's press conference, weekly press conference on COVID. We'll get his comments on that as well. That'll be coming up. All right. So on to the two big issues. First, I don't know that this is necessarily an issue of critical race theory. It's really an issue of transparency and parental rights, in my view. Critical race theory is the topic, but the issues are much broader than that. Now, yesterday on this show, we had a world premiere release. I mean, how often does a show? We have a new friend, Claire Stottmuller, a professional opera singer, has performed in Carnegie Hall, Grand Central Park, in New York. She remade an aria from the 1940s that rebuked communism. And we played that for you. We're not going to play it again today, but I just want to remind you how you get there. And then I'm going to talk about why that theme is relevant to this South Kingstown issue. So first of all, let me just share my screen very quickly. Go to oceanstatecurrent.com. And then right at the top, you'll see right in the menu bar, click Arias for Freedom. This was the first ever aria for freedom. And you can watch the abridged version and the full-length version right there, right? oceanstatecurrent.com. It's very easy. Before I get into South Kingstown, and just keeping it on the more narrow topic of critical race theory, have you seen the video? I mean, this is one of the most touching, influential, and accurate videos I've ever seen on any topic. It's a young Black father with his young Black daughter, and he's talking why critical race theory is not the way to go. And just watch this exchange between father and daughter. Let me share it with you, and I'll play it, and you're going to be amazed. Let's go.
Daddy teaches you can be anything in this world that you want to be, right? Don't Daddy teach you that?
Yeah, and it doesn't matter if you're black or white or any color.
Doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, yellow, right?
Black.
And how we treat people is based on who they are and not what color they are.
And if they're nice and smart.
See, this is how children think right here. Critical race theory wants to end that. Not with my children. It's not gonna happen. My baby's gonna know that no matter what she wants to be in life, all she has to do is work hard, and she can become that.
Work hard, even though you don't know anyone. You can make friends.
Yeah, you can make friends, no matter what color they are. So we need to stop CRT. Period. Point blank. Children do not see skin color, man. They love everybody. If they're good people, they love them.
We pray for people that are hurt.
Wow. Now, is that Martin Luther King's message or not? I mean, is that the perfect manifestation of what Martin Luther King spoke of for all those years so beautifully? And as this father and this daughter just spoke about so touchingly beautifully. Critical race theory is the opposite of Martin Luther King. It teaches that skin color doesn't matter. And it teaches that your skin color largely determines your character. I mean, the disconnect seems to be, and this is the danger of political correctness, of wokeness, that people don't think. They think that advancing critical race theory is fighting racism. What they don't see is that critical race theory is racism in itself. So they got their blinders on. Like we said, if you're woke, you have blinders on. You don't see the real world. You only see what you want to see, what your masters tell you to see. They believe they're fighting racism. They don't even realize. They're so ignorant, they don't even realize that they're being the racist. As this father and this daughter so beautifully told us how people should not be. So we promised today, and we have to retract, that we would have Nicole Solis on our show today. She was the victim. She was the subject of this meeting, school committee meeting last night in South Kingstown. School committee that threatened to sue her for asking too many questions. Literally put it on the official agenda to consider a lawsuit against Nicole Solis. Nicole Solis was on Fox and Friends yesterday morning. She's been all over the local news, radio, Providence Journal, Go Local Pub. And by the way, the local media coverage, not on the radio, of last night's school was horrendous. It was biased. It took the side of the school committee and tried to make the mother, Nicole Solis, look like the enemy. Well, Nicole's got a second national media gig. We don't know where or when yet, but she's apparently got a second national media gig lined up, and they've demanded exclusivity, which means she can't appear on this show, I don't know, at any time, or at least until she does their show. So Nicole can't be with us tonight. So in a little while, just a few minutes, we're going to have on a couple of mothers who are also parents, who are also involved in anti-indoctrination efforts in their localities, who are colleagues of Nicole. And they will be on our show shortly, and they were at the meeting last night. And we will get their perspectives of this larger issue, and specifically what happened last night. So just as a setup, so I want to link the two together. Last night, you just saw, we showed you yesterday, and we showed you how to watch the clip of An Aria for Freedom to This We've Come. And again, it's just amazing to me that we've gotten to this point, to this we've come, that a school committee is threatening to sue a parent for asking too many questions. To this we've come. That was the name of the aria that Claire performed yesterday, and that you can find on oceanstatecurrent.com. And then one of the lines that we talked about yesterday in that aria, that he be chosen without the chance for choice. Basically, that others are deciding for us what's going to become of our lives, what's going to be part of our kids, to our kids. All these things are being decided by us, by the elite who know best, without even giving us a choice, or at least respecting our choices, like vaccine passports and other things. In this case, it's the critical. So do you see the time? This is why this aria yesterday, with the message, was so powerful. To this we've come. That others are decide. That's not freedom, when others decide our lives for us, and for our families, and for our children. And this is what Nicole Solis was trying to get out of South Kingstown. I'm sending my daughter to school next year to know what the school district's overall curriculum and curriculum philosophy is. And they refused to answer. And they told her to submit records requests, and she submitted records requests, a lot of them. I charged her a big sum she had, so she broke them up into a lot of records requests. And they want to sue her, I don't know for what, harassment? They didn't even say. They allowed racial slurs. They allowed indirectly Nicole and the parent you're about to meet and other group, unnamed groups. Some named, some unnamed, all bundled together as racist because they oppose critical race theory. And they had the meeting in South Kingstown last night. So I'm going to play for you right now, before we bring on our two guests, the 2.5 minutes or so of Nicole Solis's very calm, very logical, very deliberative, and you'll find very emotional presentation to the South Kingstown School Committee. This was posted on legalinsurrection.com. Legal Insurrection is the website, a Rhode Island-based firm that first broke this story about the lawsuit on the agenda. So here is Nicole Solis at last night's South Kingstown School Committee meeting.
It was on the phone.
And first of all, as you can see, it's a packed house. It's not a big, they didn't have a lot of room there, but apparently it was packed standing room. You're only seeing part of the crowd, I guess.
I think we all know my name. It's on the agenda. And I'm not stating my address. We all know I live in Wakefield. Guys, let's speak and let's get through this. We want to hear what everybody has to say, please. I am a mother with a child enrolled in the district, going into kindergarten. I had questions about her education, and you didn't answer them. You told me to submit public record requests to answer my questions. I did what you told me. And now you're holding a public meeting to discuss suing me for doing what you told me to do. This meeting was meant to publicly humiliate me, and it didn't work.
How beautiful is that? A mom, stay-at-home mom, standing up to the thuggish bullying of the South Kingstown School Committee. It didn't work. It backfired.
I want to talk about the statement you issued today. It was replete with critical race verbiage, such as equity, which raises serious concerns about CRT in the district. Equity is CRT code word for discrimination based on race. The school committee should focus on equality, treating students without regard to race. Why is the school committee so obsessed with treating students based on their skin color? We need answers to that, not lawsuits against parents.
And it went on. And Nicole is a hero. and she's going to be a national hero soon. Larry Liberty guy was at that meeting last night. Many parents and the parents you're about to meet were at that meeting last night. Okay, joining us now are two parents who were at that meeting last evening. They are both involved in parental groups in Rhode Island that work along with Nicole Solis and her group, all focused on concerns over these racial, gender, equity theories being advanced in our public school system. So I want to welcome to In the Dugout, Polly Hopkins and Jody Sohn. Ladies, welcome to In the Dugout.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, now Jody, you are tell us, you're a mom, and what school system are your kids in?
I'm a mom in East Greenwich. I have one in East Greenwich schools, and I have two in the private school system.
Okay, and Polly?
I'm a mom. I have 3 children in the Charahoe school system.
Now, you're not from South Kingstown where this primary controversy is taking place, but you're equally concerned, as is Nicole Solis, with what's going on in your school system. So is it safe to assume that you went to last night's meeting not only to show support to your colleague, Nicole, but to also, you know, kind of maybe learn the ropes when these issues may come up within your school districts?
Correct.
Jody?
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely there to support her as a mom looking for answers, which she wasn't getting. So we need to support each other right now.
All right, so let's start. I mean, there are all kinds of reports. I wasn't there last night. It sounded like the meeting got quite contentious. Rumors of racial slurs being thrown around, emotions high. I played earlier the 2.5-minute clip of Nicole making what was a very intelligent and logical initial presentation. Just overall, Jody, what were your impressions of the tone of last night's meeting?
Shocking, really.
Wow.
I mean, leading up to it was, and I've been following it from the beginning and following Nicole, and she's asking the right questions, trying to get the right answers. It was a lot of stalling and pushback. They finally told her to submit the request. We were all following her process and what she was doing. And then she ended up on an agenda saying she was going to be sued, which was a shock. So, you know, a bunch of us moms who have tried, you know, had similar issues with school districts, just trying to get answers, went to support her in this because there was no warning this was coming. She was scared, obviously, as anybody would be. She had an attorney and went into a room full of people, and it was charged immediately. The conversation went from it being about her being sued and asking questions to this whole anti-racism, critical race theory. She was a racist. It was shocking. It was shocking.
Polly, your thoughts?
I agree with Jody. It was incredibly shocking to see a public school board attack a parent so openly and blatantly. She only asked for transparency from her school. She needed information about things that are really concerning with the activism in school lately. She wanted to know what degree that has been implemented in her school system. We're all asking those questions, and we're not going to stop asking those questions. When her school board decided they weren't going to give her that information, we all got behind her on this. It's public knowledge. It's actually owned by the public.
All right. So in listening to some of the comments, written comments from the school board members, the chair, Emily Comiskey, we know that another member, Sarah Markey, is a member of the executive of the National Education Association, the Teachers Union, and we know they are aligned primarily with the social justice, woke agenda over much more important in their mind than the education of kids. But the disconnect seems to be this. To those, it sounds like, misguided as they may be, okay? It sounds like the comments I especially heard from the chair, Ms. Comiskey, they believe they are fighting racism by advancing this agenda. And you, and probably I, believe that you don't fight racism with more racism. But that seems to be the disconnect. So let me ask you this. Do you at least think they are honest and that, again, misguided as it may be, that they think they're doing the right thing here?
I mean, I can't speak to it because the only thing I can say about that is if you believe you're doing the right thing, why are you not being open and transparent about it? You know, I have a child in a public school who are also engaging in these, but they're engaging in these hard conversations. They're putting the information out there. They're very open with parents. They're willing to have conversations. They're asking for comments and feedback. That is the exact opposite than what this mother's trying to do. So how can we have trust in the process if our school committees are not letting us have those conversations out in the open?
And you're right. We're talking about process here, but we'll get to that in a second. Polly, your response to that question.
I think the best indicator is when Nicole filed for something that was public knowledge, and in the school committee, the discussion immediately started out as a political agenda. They started pushing that she was pushing a political agenda. They came in and started labeling people with racist comments and trying to tell people what they were, when we were all there to support Nicole and she was just looking for public information.
And I think that's the problem. I think it's another way of saying what I was saying, that they can't see the forest through the trees, that they really think that what they're doing, you know, is pure, and when anyone objects to that purity, they must have some bias themselves.
That's the answer, right? That's the answer right there. They don't like to be questioned.
Right.
They kept saying over and over.
Well, they know best, right? They know best, right?
We're fighting anti-racism in this district. We're fighting this. We're fighting against you. Why are you trying to dismantle this program? Why are you trying to dismantle all the good we're doing? And I kept saying to myself, well, then show us the good. Show us, give her what she's asking for. Just show it to her.
Quit hiding. Yeah, quit hiding.
I've seen it in other schools. They're doing it successfully. Show her what she's asking for then. It was bizarre.
All right, Polly, the media coverage I read today was disturbing to me. The Providence Journal, Go Local Prov. I even heard, I didn't see it yet. I even had WPRI 12 was there and may have done a story. I thought they completely took the side of the school board, defending their pure position against this harassing mother who was out of her element. Did you agree on the media coverage, Paula?
Actually, no, I didn't.
Okay.
I started reading the WPRI article and I could pick out 3 things right away that weren't accurate, that were misconstrued. The inflated numbers of APRA requests that Nicole had filed. They took it and just, I'm at a loss for words.
They kept saying she doesn't have a child in the district. And I saw that today a few times. And I was like, she was enrolling, her daughter is enrolled in kindergarten for the fall. And every article I read, and even last night in the school committee echoed that multiple times, you don't have a child in this district. And when she got up to speak and she was like, I have a child enrolled in kindergarten. And I was like, I knew this. How do you not know that as a school committee? And then the media went with that same lie.
Yeah, so you both agree the media coverage was biased on this.
I couldn't believe it, and not based in fact at all.
You know, and that's one of their tricks that and I wish I had one of them to talk to. You know, so they're basically saying, Nicole, you don't have standing, you know, to make such concerns and make such questions. And we hear that too from the critical race theory people, that anybody in this color skin doesn't have standing to understand or ask legitimate questions about racial issues. But yet here are, how many of those women on that school committee were minorities?
1.
I think.
Okay, and is the chairwoman a minority? No, I don't think so. It don't look like it. Is Sarah Markey a minority?
Did not
It doesn't
admit-
look like, but yet here they are representing themselves as qualified to lecture us about this. I mean, isn't that quite a bit hypocritical and to you guys frustrating as a parent?
Yes, and what was also really shocking was that they were letting members of the public who again, it was almost an open meeting violation because it was an agenda item about a litigation, but it ended up becoming an agenda item about race and anti-racism curriculum in schools. And they were letting the public stand up, turn around and tell Nicole that she was a racist, that she was never been oppressed. Now, how do they know that? They don't know her ethnicity. I don't know her ethnicity.
So the barbs were coming from other members
yes.
of the audience as
They
well?
let one woman read a story to the audience, read a book, a children's book to the audience, and shame us all for being there and called us all racist.
Did either of you ladies speak last night?
No,
Okay.
I did not.
No, I did not. I was there for support, and there in our community, we usually stick to school committee members will allow only community members to speak. So we were kind of being respectful of that. We noticed there were people from other towns speaking, but
Cody and Polly, how does it make you feel? Because while they may not have directed it personally to you, in the stereotypical, ludicrous, divisive accusations they threw out, basically they are lumping you both into the category of these racist parents. How does it make you feel to be lumped in as a racist?
I am more concerned that if they're willing to lump a parent in as a racist, what they're going to do to the children at school that are way more impressionable than I am.
Yeah,
Wow.
that's a scary thought. For me, and that one hits me thinking about it now, but for me, it was more like if they're going to, and I'm seasoned at this. I've been called that before in advocating for educational equity with my own children. But if they do this to a well-educated, well-spoken, articulate mother who was asking all the right questions about her 5-year-old going into kindergarten, if they bullied her this much, can you imagine how many other people haven't gotten as far as she has? How many other moms out there that didn't have her confidence
Yeah, she's shown some real
certain
fortitude
questions
here.
and got ignored and pushed back and then left it alone? So I think they were shocked by the outpouring of support she had. Not
Would
just
you say the audience there last night was evenly split, was largely, one way or the other? How would you guys categorize that?
I'd say largely in support of Nicole.
I'd agree. At least more vocally.
So, Polly, should it matter whether you have a child enrolled in kindergarten? I've heard, well, this stuff doesn't get taught till, middle or senior high school anyway, or or whether you're just a concerned citizen of in this town of South Kingston or across the state. Shouldn't we all be concerned about A, what is being taught to our children, and B, whether a school district is being transparent about that? Isn't that a concern?
Yeah.
All of us?
It's your tax dollars, isn't it? It's your concern. It's your community. These are your neighbors. So even if you pull your kid out of school because you don't agree with the critical race theory that they may be teaching, the neighbor child has been, he's going to school, they're teaching it to him, and enmeshed in that activism is community spread. And it is behind every single school system in this state and in this country to spread it to community members.
Well, and that's what's interesting. And so also was a flag for me about why they couldn't and wouldn't answer her questions, because this is happening in unison. It is happening in unison all across the state at the same time, in the same months, consistently. And we've been locked out of school committees, right? Like East Greenwich, we're still not having in-person meetings. Our kids have been locked out of school. We can't get access to our representatives in person. So she's asking these questions and it's happening in unison. So what's happening at a higher level, and why aren't parents as stakeholders, as the most important stakeholders? Why are we being locked out of these conversations?
Well, I want to thank you both for standing up for your group. All right, a few more questions. And I just lost my train of thought on the one. Well, let me ask you this. So neither of you are South Kingston residents and have a direct stake in this, but like you said, it is community spread stuff. We all have a stake. We all pay taxes, as you said, Polly, on this.
Yep.
Was the behavior you saw last night? Oh, I know what it was. One of the other, so they tried to bully Nicole into threatening a lawsuit against her, and they left that meeting with their tail between their legs, deciding, well, we're not going to go there. Obviously, with the national attention and local attention that's getting, so that was a bluff, but it was a bullying tactic. Mm-hmm. They also tried to intimidate the crowd, in my view.
Yes.
When one of the members said, "I don't feel safe anymore," weren't they just trying to shut you up or shut down the meeting or something like that? Do you guys remember that moment? Can you tell us, was there any reason any one of those school committee members should have felt unsafe?
No, everyone was seated. There were 2 police officers on site just outside the doors. There was nobody within 12 feet of her besides the rest of the school committee.
What happened was the audience like erupted in like, oh my, come on. Like it was, and I think that even shocked her. There was no empathy there.
When she said that, I don't feel safe. They knew it was just a ploy, right?
I can't speak to that. And what she did say was, you're laughing, but we've received threats of violence via email today leading up to this meeting. And, I can't speak to the validity of that, but I do know that there are inquiries into the police department who were there on staff to see if those were actually made. So,
well, what they've also received, Ms. Comiskey and Ms. Markey, is a call from our center today for their resignations, for their involvement, not just because of the CRT issue, but in refusing to comply in a timely manner with Nicole's records requests, and even putting on an agenda an item to sue a parent, a clear union bullying tactic.
I mean, the ACLU came out against it and said that was a big mistake.
And for allowing these racial slurs to go unchallenged, whether they were throwing them or someone else was throwing them. This is not what we expect from public officials.
No.
Is this what you expect? So I'm gonna ask you a tough question. I'm putting you on the spot here. Is this what you expect is this the proper behavior from public officials? And do you support our call that they should step down and we should let somebody more reasonable onto that school committee?
I'll second the motion for their resignation, if that's what it takes. The actions I saw last night, I would estimate they would be in probably grade 9 if they were to have to go back to school.
Less than that.
So immature.
But
So
this is also coupled with, and the reason I guess I say I would agree with your call is what has just happened in South Kingstown. This is at the tail end of, they just lost a massive bond fight, like an $87 million bond, which they were
decisively lost.
And then front loading that was somehow the AFL-CIO somehow got addresses and personal contact information for every child in the school district. Second graders were getting pro-bond flyers from the AFL-CIO, and there's an investigation into that.
Well, that just proves to me, that this is why we call for Sarah Markey to resign.
Well, I mean, I think there's
because we know these are union tactics, the mailers, right? The union supported the school bond that was defeated, and we know that's a union tactic to threaten legal action against somebody. So we don't have the evidence to prove, but it's my clear conviction, that this is we predicted this years ago, that when she was elected as an NEA executive to the school committee, there was going to be major problems down in South Kingstown, and those have come to light. All right, last question, or last issue. We are doing a soft launch, a soft announcement right now that, combined with Nicole's group, Parents Against Indoctrination, which many of your groups you're involved. By the way, name your groups. Polly, what is the name of your group you're involved with?
Charahoe Community Fight Critical Race Theory in our schools.
Okay, and Jody, the name of the group you're involved with?
I'm a member of Rise Up, which has gotten a lot done here recently with the mask issue, and I'm in some parent groups in East Greenwich.
So we have all, led by Nicole, approved by everybody, and we are starting a petition to end the to stop indoctrination of our students, a statewide petition. You can go to the website, our website, rifreedom.org, and sign that petition. We will bring that up shortly to show our viewers. But why do parents, last question to each of you, why do parents across the state need to sign this petition, and why do they need to be concerned about what happened in South Kingstown last night? Start with you, Jody.
Oh, you got me on the spot. I think transparency. I think transparency is number one. This has gotten so far because we've been locked out, because they've been able to do things behind closed doors, and things have just gotten so far, and they're used to getting away with it. And this is what happens. Parents are upset now, and now they can't get answers. So if we don't stop it now, we're losing parents are losing their rights at the school door.
Yes.
And that's where it stops for me.
And ultimately, isn't this about parental rights? This is about parental rights in the
Yes.
end. That's where transparency comes in. Polly, your response to the petition and to your message to other parents.
Thanks, Mike. The best advice I can give parents is to first start off trolling through all the websites of your kid's school. You'll start seeing things pop up. You'll have a lot of questions. Those questions can be traced back to indoctrination that is starting to happen in your school. Their parents need to step up. They need to instill the values themselves and not rely on the school to do it for them. The school is not going to do it the way you want to do it. They're not going to respect your religion or your values or your history. We need to stand up for our families, our communities, and
Time for parents to rise up, right? Time for parents to rise up. Yep. Ladies, Polly Hopkins, Jody Stone, thank you so much for being on the Dugout. We'll look forward to having you back, and we'll get some updates. Thank you for your time today.
thank you.
Mike.
All right, now for our regular Thursday afternoon half hour with the esteemed Dr. Andrew Bostom. Dr. Andy, got your cap for us today?
Oh, yes.
That's all right. You're forgiven if you don't have it. We just there it is. There it is. All right, the old husky cap. Okay. And I think a theme today, the doc, before we get in, I'm gonna toot your horn. Okay. Some of the things we're gonna cover today basically has reinforced that everything, or many things, not everything yet, I'm sure they will eventually, but many of the things you've been talking to us for months, for half a year, 6, 7, are all people are now realizing are true for other reasons. Data's coming out, minds are less stubborn. And on this show, I just want our audience to know that, I heard somebody on the radio call in and refer to you as a quack. They refer to me as a quack because we dare to resist the status quo. We dare to disrupt. We dare not to follow the conventional narratives that they try to feed us. And you're in that boat, and I'm in that boat, both. But I want our audience to know that nothing you have told us, advised us, or the data you have has been discredited. Nothing. In fact, most of it is now coming true. So I want to thank you for that. I want our audience to recognize that. And with that, I did not get a chance to see today the weekly COVID press conference by Governor McKee. Andy, what were your observations? Where would you like to start?
Well, I mean, there was a heavy push to vaccinate still. even though
Everybody, indiscriminately.
Yes, but I mean the constructive aspect of vaccination, if it had been applied with the way I originally thought it was going to be applied, I will say, well, one of the big flaws that I see in my anticipating where things were headed was that I really did not imagine that this was going to be a vaccination program that was mass vaccination. In other words, I thought it was going to, since it was such a clearly defined disease. It really is. I mean,
And
now
pretty clearly defined group of people who are vulnerable to it.
that's what I meant. That's really what I meant. I mean, now, of course, the idea that this came out of the Wuhan lab is probably, I would say, the most compelling hypothesis, given the accumulating data. So everyone who had a suspicion of that, including people who probably wouldn't admit it, obviously that was a concern, Mike. I mean, when you're dealing with something that could potentially be biological warfare, there was a really, I don't think an excess of caution at that point at the beginning was unreasonable, but it played itself out. COVID played itself out pretty clearly, even going back to the Diamond Princess. We had 3,700 people confined on a cruise ship, no masks, no mitigation, obviously no therapies available, and the tragic deaths that occurred on that cruise ship were all in those 70 and above. And about a third of the entire passenger ship never came down with a clinical syndrome that was easy to pick up with testing. So a lot of things, were declared. So, but we have 93% of the 65 plus vaccinated in the state of Rhode Island, fully vaccinated. Wow. So I don't think you're going to get any more protection out of a vaccination strategy than what that number implies, because that's really where the morbidity and the mortality is, with increasingly rare exceptions as you go down, the age groups into the young. And so that's why I was very concerned when, first of all, Dr. Scott once again said, quote, "You can't rely on natural immunity." I mean, Mike, we just have to call it what it is at this point. That's not science, that's Scientology. And I just think that's preposterous for a public health official to say so brazenly and so confidently when there's reams of both epidemiologic data from various countries, all different ethnicities, from Israel through across the Arab world to Europe.
So she was specifically saying that if you've had the disease and recovered, that's not good enough.
You can't rely on natural immunity. I don't know how else you interpret those words, because it was attached to a big, heavy push that only the vaccine can protect people. So that's just wrong. And
all right, man, let me stay on that. Can you comment on this? Because I was going to bring this up later, but here's a headline. There's some report. Have you seen this reporting? Is there any credibility to this?
Yeah. If it's well, these news headlines, it's very hard to understand what they're reporting to, but I think the way it's been reported in the press, I read the actual paper. Not that I'm a snob or anything, but that's my job. I read the actual paper, and what they were talking about was B memory cells, that there's evidence now. So the B cells that produce the antibodies,
but that is natural immunity, right?
Yeah. Also have long-term cells that can migrate back into your bone marrow and be recruited again in the case of a new infection. And those cells are not going to fade away in the short term, even in terms of a year or so. Those may last for the life of the individual, and that's independent of the long-lived T cell immunity.
Independent of T cells. Okay,
that's right. That's right. So I believe that's what this was referring to. I did see. You'll have to forgive me. I'm not sure if this was the one that came out of UCSF or another lab, where basically they were describing about a year out the ability to isolate B memory cells from people that were infected back in 2020, and that's a very positive. That's a very, very positive sort of finding that's consistent with long-term natural immunity, in addition to T cell immunity, which by the way, Mike, I think we've mentioned this before, that at the beginning of COVID, some survivors of SARS-CoV-1, the 2003 localized epidemic, mostly in Asia, but some pockets of Asian populations, in the US and Canada, some of those survivors were recruited, and lo and behold, 17 years later, they still had a pretty robust T cell immunity. So yeah, I mean, it's just really beyond the pale when you hear a public health official say this, but it's attached to a pitch. Tactically, it's not it's wrong, but tactically she's attaching it to this pitch that kids should be vaccinated. And that I have real problems.
And would you say kids have a natural immunity or a natural resistance to symptoms? How would you describe why kids, how would you describe that medically?
Yeah.
Is it an immunity or is it a resistance? Is there a difference?
I think that they have they may have some cross-reactive immunity from twice a year being infected with common cold causing coronaviruses.
Oh, okay.
That are pretty common in kids. That's conferring something. And then they just overall have a very robust immune system that's not specifically selective to COVID. They just have mucosal immunity. So the cells that line your nose, your throat, your lungs, the kids just have a very robust and flexible immune system in general terms, which is probably helping them. But and why it might be even more specific to COVID may have something to do with other coronaviruses. Or things that we don't understand yet. But the point is, it's playing out in a way, we've reviewed the data where, for example, compared to pandemic influenza in 2009, 2010, where there were over 1,200 deaths, by the time you call out the true COVID deaths, you're probably down to about 200 over 16 months in children. I mean, that's like 1/6 of what happened.
All right. Now, speaking of kids, now I heard just a headline on the 2:00 news. Like I said, I didn't hear the actual press conference, but it still sounds like state of officials, despite all the evidence that's come out recently, the Fauci emails, which we'll get to in a minute, but still they're not giving up on the idea that kids need to wear masks in schools or at other indoor places.
And at the presser, Pat Ford said, wait a minute, we've got a forecast coming up, but it's going to be in the 90s next week. And these school buildings are hot. You're telling me that you can't give the kids a respite from wearing masks inside the school buildings in 90-degree weather? And the answer was basically, no.
We'll look into it, right?
The real answer, because she's saying, look, it's not something you can put off. It's going to be Monday. So they're not going to change that rule.
All right, let's go to some Rhode Island data. Again, I'm going to go to the WPRI website, which does a nice job consolidating the graph. So we want to look at right here. No, I don't know what I just did there. Get rid of that. All right, so we want to look at this precipitous drop, almost to nothing, of cases per week. Deaths are alternating between 0 and 1. Hospitalizations are below 50.
Right.
Intensive care unit, new hospitalizations are below 5 a day. Intensive care unit.
And remember, Mike, the new hospitalizations are going to include I would say at this point, probably mostly with COVID.
Right, not because of COVID. And the positivity rate is almost at 0.
Right.
Here, as you can see.
Today was 0.3.
All right, are we still in a pandemic emergency?
No, it's obviously not, and it hasn't been for weeks and weeks. So, this is a really an absurdity that we're still considering this a state of emergency.
All right,
and what was being held over was they're still talking about variants.
Variants, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all the variants that actually variants predominate now in Rhode Island in one way or another, and everywhere else. And yet we still have a 0.3% positivity rate. So much for the variant story.
All right. Now you can see here about a year ago, in late June, a year ago, we reached the nadir, and it looked like it was heading to 0.
Right.
We were warned of a fall second wave, and sure enough, in the late fall, It did come back, and now we're back a little earlier than we were last time. Do you have any concern at all that we could repeat this fall wave again?
I mean, I'm actually more concerned. I mean, we could have a strong flu season, for example, this year. I mean, you know, that's certainly a possibility. It seems like with this phenomenon of viral interference that regardless of whether there were these non-pharmaceutical interventions employed strictly in lockdowns and everything, and mask mandates or not, like in Sweden, that the flu was very, very weak this year. So that would be a concern. I think there's plenty of immunity now in the population, certainly in the state of Rhode Island.
So we should never, ever again with COVID anyway, see that kind of spike.
Yeah. I mean, unless some truly different kind of variant evolves that is considered new to the immune system, which again I think it's highly unlikely. I would be more concerned about the possibility of having a strong flu season. But you know, we have a lot of experience with flu and the vaccines, and I'd like to talk about that. The flu vaccines, they're not they're not all that effective, although but what efficacy they do have is not bought at the price of a very bad side effect profile that we frankly are seeing with the COVID vaccines. And so it's a known commodity. So
all right, before we get to the vaccines, a lot of talk last week or two. Dr. Fauci email, a tranche of emails was released. What jumped out to you in these new discoveries? Is this guy legit or not?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think there's some very serious stuff about the origins of SARS-CoV-2 and what he knew about gain of function research. And I think that's going to have to be vigorously and aggressively investigated by Congress, by the Senate, because you know he may be guilty of perjury. And the emails have confirmed that he was giving, at best, very disingenuous responses, particularly to Rand Paul in the last round of hearings. So that's very important stuff that has to be teased out. You know, there's correspondence where he was being told that the genetics of what they were looking at early on with SARS-CoV-2 suggested engineering. I mean, and this was by a virologist.
The emails revealed that?
Oh yes, the emails have revealed that. And this was by a virologist, I believe his last name is Anderson, who then, you know, some weeks after that is thanking Fauci for his comments or his endorsement of a paper that this guy Anderson wrote, which comes to the opposite conclusion. You know, and gets published in Nature Medicine.
That it couldn't have been man-made.
Exactly. That it must have evolved from some animal reservoir, particularly bats, you know, possibly pangolins, whatever. But I remember reading the paper at the time, and you know, I'm not a virologist. I mean, it was published in a respectable journal, and it really did hold sway.
And I think the emails that I see also show that it also proved that masks were not effective.
Here's the great one. He has a correspondence. He has a correspondence, and he says he's giving advice. This is Fauci's advice from February. The typical mask you buy in the drugstore is not really effective in keeping the virus out. That's Fauci in February. Then
that's an email from Fauci.
That's from Fauci. Then a month later, he gets an email through his staff that reports on 9 randomized controlled trials of community masking, which are been pooled together and are null. And then, of course, we've talked about this a month after that. The CDC's House Journal, one of its House journals, Emerging Infectious Diseases, publishes a meta-analysis of 10 randomized controlled studies that are negative within a month of Fauci getting.
And you say null or negative, meaning they don't have a positive.
Didn't reduce infections in the community, and you know.
Yeah, but come on, but Andy, come on. All you got to do is wear 2 masks, and then it works, right?
Exactly. So you see how this was Rand Paul once again, who's a very sharp guy, got it right. This was
and you got it right. And we got it right.
I read the trial data.
And so did Fauci.
But what's striking, Mike, is that Fauci is being given this data and he makes no comment, but it was shoved in his face. I mean, so, and by the way, his own opinions were not discordant with that finding at the time.
All right, so let me get you into politics then. 'Cause I know you like to weigh in on, I mean, sort of a more political question on this. So what would drive a scientist like Fauci when it comes to the Wuhan lab theory, when it comes to the effectiveness or not, in this case, of masks, to purposely promote public statements and positions that run counter to the science that we now know he was aware of? What would motivate a scientist to do that?
A generous explanation would be that he's grasping at straws. A less generous explanation would be that it's basically CYA, because he knows he's involved with potentially this gain of function research that's caused the whole problem. And now he's just, pushing masking, to lay down a marker that he's encouraging an approach. Look, it was, Mike, regardless of the motivation, you have to admit it, they won the argument. I mean, look at the people look around you in the state of Rhode Island, which was the most mask compliant state in the country. By the way. At one point, we had 96% compliance every time people went out of the house. There are still people now that this is totally burned out. You see them in stores. They're terrified to take their mask off. So the mask mandarins won. No, hands down. It was a slam dunk.
Could it also have been a little bit of this? Just playing politics? I mean,
I think control, absolutely. I mean, there's whether where Fauci fits on this spectrum of this, this sort of neo-Marxist authoritarian ideology, I don't know. I think he's an authoritarian. That's obviously another possibility. I don't think, I think that I'm more concerned now. I mean, masking, I think intelligent people and aware people get masking, that it's ridiculous, and that they're not going to put up with it anymore. And they're not.
And we know that nationally, with all these states now opening up and loosening or eliminating totally any mask mandates, that we have not seen any.
And we know the converse, that when with these huge spikes, all these mask mandates were in place.
All right, one more question on sort of the political angle before I let you go where you want on vaccines.
Yeah.
So I saw a headline the other day. I didn't save it and clip it here, but basically it was a pretty good article. Can't remember from where, that talks about politics. That because of politics, and probably because of money, right? Money for these vaccines, but the treatment, the ivermectin treatment, along with hydroxychloroquine, they were belittled, they were ignored in the early phases of all this, and that treatment, different from a vaccine, that treatment could have saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of lives if medicine was allowed to be medicine. Do you concur?
I think there's some merit. I don't know how to put a
number,
a body count on it or anything, but I certainly think that there's some merit. I mean, even if you look at the weaker effects of hydroxychloroquine, but the more rigorous studies, when you pool together randomized controlled trials, small ones with hydroxychloroquine, particularly given early, you do see about a 20 to 25% reduction in the development of clinically relevant infections or infections leading to hospitalization. So that's not trivial when you think of all the people infected. And then for ivermectin, I've seen randomized trials which show even a bigger effect. It's really hard to say in the absence of better, larger randomized controlled trial data, which unfortunately were only performed for things that turned out to be a very limited benefit, like remdesivir. It's a shame and I will say one thing that this is the most perplexing of all to me, to be honest, Mike, is we have some good randomized controlled data of the monoclonal antibody, particularly the cocktails of monoclonal antibodies, which are less prone to generate resistance to treatment. It's like when you treat with a couple of antibiotics as opposed to one, for example, or multiple antibiotics to treat tuberculosis. You did with the question of resistance. What's shocking to me is that those got a lot of financial support, and they seem to have been quickly superseded by mass vaccination.
Yep.
And those look very, very promising in small but impressive randomized controlled trials. And even where there was a profit to be made, these were not cheap. These were not like ivermectin. These were not like hydroxychloroquine. I don't know if they got the utility that they really deserved. So I don't know what this whole issue is, Mike. It's a little confusing to me.
All right, where would you like to go with vaccines? What new
Well,
data do you
I think
have?
the most-
New
the most-
opinions or advice do you have?
Yeah, the most important thing to me was that, we've talked a little bit before about the vaccine adverse event reporting system, which is a passive system. There's like glaring signals when you compare COVID to the entire history of the other vaccines in that database. But putting that aside,
Flu shots and whatnot.
yeah, but putting that not just flu shots, like everything. But putting that aside, in Israel, the issue of myocarditis reared its head, and there was actually
Which is the heart inflammation, right? Which is a heart issue, right?
Yes, inflammation of the heart, which can lead to serious heart dysfunction, critical rhythm abnormalities that can cause sudden death. So it can be a serious condition. It's got to be watched, even if it turns out to have a relatively benign course, which thank God has been the case with these young people in Israel. Hadassah Medical Center found that cases of myocarditis post-vaccine, particularly after the second dose of the Pfizer vaccine, were 5 to 25 times the normal number over the same span in previous years. In other words, admissions were coming in at a rate that they were just not used to seeing, particularly
of myocarditis.
That's right, particularly in this age group 16 to 30. 19 of the 20 cases were young males, 16 to 30, and 18 of them presented within 4 days of the second vaccine dose. And they all had a clinical syndrome. This was not just picked up by testing. They had chest pain or difficulty breathing. And they say only 2 of the 20 had evidence of past infection, but not acute infection. I want to distinguish that, Mike. That may actually, have contributed to them having more of an immune reaction. They were talking about people that had evidence of past infection through antibodies. And he also read a case report that was published already in the literature of an older person, 56 years old, but completely healthy, from Italy, where this guy had an infection like 9 months earlier. And then he comes in this type of scenario with acute myocarditis. So what I'm concerned about is that we now have it's very difficult to get your hand around estimates from the VAERS system, a very passive, very delayed reporting system. You actually have careful surveillance, at least in one catchment area. Hadassah Hospital deals with about 2/3 of Jerusalem. It's not huge, but at least we have real hard data by people that are like addressing this in a serious way, and they've raised a concern. Now, will that apply elsewhere in the world? We don't know. But one of the advantages of studying this in Israel, of course, is they were vaccine central, but also they were very meticulous about trying to calculate in their hands what the previous experience was independent of vaccination.
Right.
And it's clustering in a group of people that are healthy. That's the other thing, Mike.
So, right. So you said it right. Raise concerns. We don't know for sure. So we've been talking a lot the last few weeks and months about vaccinating K through 12 kids. You just mentioned the study 16 to 30. So is it your advice now that even if you're under 30, you really might want to pay attention to this data and
Mike,
think through those concerns?
When you look at the epidemiology of myocarditis in the young, if anything, the group that's less than the group that was reported in Israel. Remember, they stopped vaccinating below the age of 16. They're still contemplating that. And now there's a real hot debate.
Who's they? Who's they?
I'm
Israel?
sorry, the Israelis. The Israelis. There's a real hot debate in Israel, certainly as a result of these data. But the vaccine zealots don't even care about these data. They want.
Well, it's good that they're at least having a debate, right?
Oh, they're having
in this country, we're not even having a
Exactly.
debate. They're just telling us indiscriminately everyone to get it.
But Mike, this myocarditis signal forced the debate. It was proceeding merrily ahead that they were going to go and vaccine at least down to 12, and this cluster of cases really caught people's attention. I think it sounds to me as if the vaccine zealots still have the upper hand for whatever reason. Oh, it's not that much. It's like, but what I'm concerned about in this country is, you rightly point out, the lack of debate. But we also have a pretty crappy monitoring system that, unless there's like a glaring signal, I looked at it. To me, it's glaring, but I guess it doesn't look glaring to other people. I looked at, because of the way the cut points are in the vaccine, in the VAERS system, I looked at ages 6 to 39. Okay, that's just that's just a convenient way to do the sampling in the VAERS because of their age cut groupings. And what I saw was, again, and these are just the crudest associations, but you read the case reports and, a lot of them are very compelling, but they're still just these associations. 143, cases had been reported as of the last data dump. There'll be another one probably tomorrow. And in the entire 40-year history of the flu database that I was able to look at, there were 30. I mean, I don't know. To me, that's quite a signal, Mike. I mean, 6 months versus 40 years.
Well, the point being, it's something to think about. It's something parents should be aware of, so they can make their own calculations on risk reward.
Well, in terms of sanity, though, getting back to sort of more the college age kids, I read something very refreshing, and of course, Mike, because it's the Midwest, they are more sane. It was the University of Iowa. They called it Reminder of University Guidance for Instructors and Staff Who Work with Students. And what was it about? It was about vaccination and masking of this very low risk student population. And the bottom line was that neither vaccination nor masking was mandated. And moreover, instructors, i.e., college professors, including the wokest of the wokest, cannot require masking or even ask students about their vaccination status. That is a college policy worth emulating. Worth emulating at a big, and even a University of Iowa, I'm sure politically, leans left, but it's whoever decided that policy is.
At least they put some critical, rational thought into it, right?
Absolutely, protecting privacy, hopefully understanding the mercifully benign nature of the disease in the student population, and the concerns that students have. Because, by the way, this is another interesting piece of data. Penn State studied, the way they couch this, of course, it's a study of vaccine hesitancy, of course, but it's 18 to 29-year-olds on Penn's enormous university campus. And isolated a group that, of course, were pejoratively dubbed vaccine hesitant. And you know what their concerns were? They have worries about unknown side effects, about unforeseen problems in children, and that the vaccine was not sufficiently evaluated for safety.
No, who's been saying that for months?
These are rational concerns.
Well, that's what you've been saying, and we've been copying, parroting for months.
But Mike, pejoratively, they noticed something else about them. They thought it was a pejorative. I think it's a positive. They were politically conservative.
Oh.
But that was a big pejorative, according to the investigators. But to me, it made perfect sense. That, first of all, conservatism in an old-fashioned way, that they're reticent. They want to see more information before they subject themselves to something. But of course, that was a pejorative, according to the investigators.
Always great information. We're out of time, Dr. Andrew Bostom. Great stuff again. We're going to start getting more and more of your kind of commentary, because we enjoy that too. You give us all great data, but we love your commentary too. So let's get some more of that from you in the future.
All right.
Thanks,
care,
Andy.
Bye-bye. All
right, folks, let's wrap up this show. And let's repeat our main theme from yesterday and what I mentioned earlier today. But again, to this we've come. Just think of the two segments we had today. We have a school committee in South Kingston that's suing a parent because she asked too many questions, asked uncomfortable questions, forced transparency about students' curriculum, trying to force it. And they threatened to sue her. And they held a special committee meeting last night to try to intimidate her under the threat of a lawsuit. Of course, they had no grounds to sue her. But of course, it was a thuggish tactic to try to intimidate her. And you heard her in the video we played stand right up to them and said, if you thought you could intimidate me, you failed. In fact, I'm sure it's going to backfire on them. In fact, it's going to backfire so much that, as I mentioned during the interview with the two parents just before Dr. Bostom, that our center today called on the resignation of two of those school committee members, the school committee chair, Comiskey, and the school committee member, Markey. And remember, Markey is the union executive who was hopelessly conflicted on school events when her union has such a pointed opinion and such heavy political influence in all matters because of not only their collective bargaining status, but their political status in the town. We called today and we're going to be seeking support. You'll be hearing more about it for the resignation of at least two. We might even expand that, at least two of those South Kingston school committee members. And to this we've come, right, that they would sue that. And again, the theme we've always said, we've never used it to this we've come theme until this week, but forcing masks, vaccine passports, ignoring science, like we just talked about, you just can't indiscriminately say that everybody, and especially every young person, should get vaccinated. It's not, that's a parental choice, but it is not proper for any health official to say it. And Dr. Bostom has been right on this all along, and now test results and other opinions are coming around to back up what you've heard on this show for months. But again, to this we've come, that even science, we've always known school committees and teachers unions were influenced by politics, but we've never seen science so strongly influenced by politics. Wait a minute, yes, we have. Climate change. That's not science either. Those are politically calculated models that, just like the models that predicted how many deaths and hospitalizations we would have because of COVID, were wrong, grossly wrong. So have been the models predicting devastating, extinguishing climate events. Existential is the word I was looking for, climate events because of carbon emissions. It's just not happening, and it's just wrong. And it was all politically driven. To this we've come. I will be out of town again next week. Last week, it was for vacation, sandwiched in some meetings with you guys this week. But now I have a business trip next week. So not sure what our shows will look like. Larry the Liberty Guy will be in charge of that. But we will see you in 2 weeks. We're in the dugout. Mike Stenhouse, good day.